Good evening. My name is Gary Zola. I am the Executive Director of the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives, the building in which you are currently located. We believe it to be the largest catalog collection of documentary evidence on the history of North American Jewry. And I know most of you have already been welcomed to this historic campus of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. I always like to ask, just for the fun of it, if there's anybody in the room who is visiting the Hebrew Union College for the very first time. Put your hands up. Oh, there you are. Okay, we want to welcome you. There is actually a special blessing for visiting the Hebrew Union College the first time, but since I'm a Reform rabbi and since we're pressed for time, just like the Egyptian mummy, we're going to just keep going. So I'll tell you, I'm so happy to see all of you here, and especially happy that my teacher and my friend, Rabbi Priesand, is here. I do want to, though, acknowledge someone who I didn't know was going to be in the room, and I'm going to give him a very special shout-out. Some of you in the room remember when this beautiful building came into existence. And there are others of you who know from your own life's experience how difficult it is to erect a building. And especially to be the logistics person and the manager of such a project, because as you know, you have to make sure that the basement is in place before the roof can go up, and then the roof has to go in place before this could go. I mean, it is really an amazing profession. And I hope that at least as you walked in, you were able to enjoy the beauty of this building, which I believe reflects the treasures that it contains. And just so happens that the construction manager who helped to put this building up is in this room. And he's my friend, and he's a wonderful friend of this school. And where is Fred now? Fred, stand up. We want to thank you. Well, we have a lot of guests here this evening, and I want to take a minute. Again, I know they were introduced over at the exhibit, the Holy Sparks exhibit, which I hope you have a chance to see. But we have with us this evening Dr. Andrew Refeld, who is the president of the Hebrew Union College. We have Rabbi Dr. Andrea Weiss, who is the provost of the Hebrew Union College. We have Sue Newman-Hochberg, who is the chair of the board of the Hebrew Union College. We have Debbie Sorrentino, who is the chair of the Central Region of Advisors, with us this evening. And of course, Aharon Chaviv, the dean of the Cincinnati campus, Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Hecht. Welcome to all. So, friends, it is, by the way, this is being live streamed, which is, of course, as you know, the only reason I wore a suit. And so those of you who are watching from near and far, I want to begin by pointing out that the exhibit that the people here in Cincinnati are going to see this evening is soon going to be available to be viewed electronically on the internet, so that people all over the world will be able to tour it from your own computers. So if those of you who are watching us this evening live streamed, we will send out a notice when that's established and ready to go, but we hope that literally thousands of people will be able to see it. Now, friends, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Marcus Center and to the inauguration of what will be here at the American Jewish Archives, a year-long exhibit illuminating the life and the career of our guest of honor, Rabbi Sally Priesand, who, as everybody knows, is marking this year the 50th anniversary of her ordination. Now, some of the people in this room just came over from our sister exhibit, which is over at Mayerson, and that is the Holy Sparks exhibit. And that focuses, as some of you have already seen, on the entire flow of women in the Rabbinate and focusing on 24 very special figures. Now, this exhibit, this documentary exhibit, goes hand in glove together with Holy Sparks because Rabbi Priesand's ordination constituted a watershed occasion in the modern Jewish experience. And that's because, as the name of the exhibit teaches us, Sally paved the way. And in doing so, she became an idolon to literally hundreds of women rabbis who have followed her into the rabbinate. Let me hasten to add that Rabbi Priesand's pioneering career has not only affected the Reform movement, nor has it only affected just the liberal wing of Jewish religious life. It is today an undeniable fact that Rabbi Priesand's path-breaking ordination set in motion a whole series of changes that broke down centuries-old barriers that had prevented women from assuming leadership roles as officiants, as scholars, and as interpreters of Jewish religious life. So therefore, the American Jewish Archives has determined to craft a special exhibit that sheds light on one of American Jewry's living legends, Rabbi Sally J. Priesand. Now, Rabbi Priesand's love of this campus and this city are well known to anyone who happens to know Rabbi Priesand. She is, of course, an Ohioan through and through. She was raised in Cleveland, and she earned her undergraduate diploma at the University of Cincinnati across the street, and, as you know, in 1972, her ordination right here in Cincinnati. This campus, and especially the AJA, occupy a very special place in Rabbi Priesand's heart. Now, this is my favorite picture. All of you know the picture of Rabbi Priesand holding the Torah, gazing off into the celestial world. And this, though, is my very favorite picture of Rabbi Priesand, who I gather was about 12 at this time. But if you take a look carefully at the circle, that says, and I know our photographer would never let this happen. It's not easy to read the name of the American Jewish Archives, but she's standing in front of the American Jewish Archives when this picture was taken. Now, it seems to me to be particularly fitting that this special commemorative exhibit that is being housed at the American Jewish Archives and of course was founded, this institution, by one of Rabbi Priesand's most distinguished professors, Professor Jacob Rader Marcus. He was the founder and the founding director of this institution, and he shaped its entire destiny. Dr. Marcus was, as almost everyone in this room should know, a beloved teacher, a pioneering scholar of the American Jewish experience, and one of the most distinguished figures in 20th century American Jewish life. In February of 1972, this here is actually a real scan of the real letter of admission to rabbinical school for Rabbi Priesand. In February of 1972, Dr. Marcus issued a news release from the American Jewish Archives heralding the forthcoming ordination of his student, Rabbi Sally Priesand. On Saturday, June the 3rd, 1972, Dr. Marcus wrote these words: "The first woman, rabbi, will be ordained by a theological school on the Cincinnati campus of Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion." It is interesting to read Dr. Marcus's words today as we celebrate now the golden anniversary of Rabbi Priesand's ordination. A little later, or over at the exhibit, we will be celebrating all that has come from her ordination. But Dr. Marcus's news release on Sally's forthcoming ordination back in 1972 resonates with an unflagging confidence in Sally and in Sally's abilities, as well as his own unique, buoyant optimism over the historic significance of the path-breaking event that was just about to occur in that year. Marcus informed his readers that he did not have even, and I'm quoting, the slightest doubt that Sally would distinguish herself in the American Rabbinate. I'm quoting, "She is competent and unpretentious. She is a good speaker and a fine human being. The congregation will admire and respect her. The children will love her." His predictions, friends, have proven to be remarkably true. Now, some today may think it surprising and remarkable that a 76-year-old, that's how old he was then, rabbi, ordained in 1920, could have possibly embraced such a progressive stance at a time when so many American Jews doubted the wisdom and the propriety of such a radical departure from traditional Jewish practice. In fact, Dr. Marcus's convictions had very deep roots. It is critically important to bear in mind that Jacob Rader Marcus began collecting primary sources on the American Jewish woman many decades before the advent of women's Jewish studies in the American Academy. Upon the founding of this institution in 1947, the AJA marks, as you now can see, 75 years since its founding this year. Dr. Marcus began from the beginning collecting diaries, letters, journals, scrapbooks, speeches, and many other source material that documented and chronicled the history of the American Jewish woman. His farsightedness comes into bold relief when we bear in mind that the first accredited women's studies course in the United States was offered at Cornell University in the year 1969, 3 years before the watershed ordination of Rabbi Priesand. So Marcus was preserving the records when other historians were throwing these materials into the trash, as one might discard useless, frivolous bibelot. In doing so, Marcus wanted to build an AJA to be the custodian of the largest catalog collection of documentary evidence on the history of Jewish life in the American nation, and so it is. And Rabbi Priesand has intentionally and capably contributed to Dr. Marcus's legacy. Why? Not only because she has supported this institution in countless ways, but perhaps her most enduring gift will be the decision she made in 2006, the year she retired from her wonderful pulpit, Monmouth Reformed congregation. It was in that year that Rabbi Priesand announced to the public that she had now determined to donate her historical records to the American Jewish Archives, and more so, that she wanted to work to create a special accession project which would create an ongoing collection initiative bringing the historical records of the first generation of women rabbis to the American Jewish Archives so that they can be researched and studied. This project, now almost 15 years in the making, has already been an enormous success. For we have here already at the American Jewish Archives literally dozens of significant women's papers from the Rabbinate and it is without question that already today, the AJA is and will remain the most important center for studying the history of women rabbis in the world. Now finally, Rabbi Priesand never fails to recognize wherever she talks the memory of Rabbi Regina Yonas. This woman, a young Jewish woman, received her private ordination in the year 1935. She was deported to Priesand in 1942, and in the fall of 1944, she was sent to her death at Auschwitz. Some of Rabbi Yonas's writings have survived the Nazi inferno, and in reflecting on her aspirations, she expressed her desire, and I quote, to be a blessing for Israel's future and for the future of humankind. Those were the words of Rabbi Yonas. This is the back of that picture. It's one of the most gripping phenomena. If those of you who read Hebrew, you'll see on the back of the picture the Hebrew words at the bottom in her handwriting. And she writes, Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh, from the scriptures, which in English means, I will be what I will be. Now, Rabbi Sally Priesand's entire rabbinate, in my opinion, has been the fulfillment of Rabbi Yonas's highest ambition. For Rabbi Priesand, Sally has been and remains to this day a blessing for Israel's future and a blessing for humankind. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you will join me in giving the warmest of welcomes to this podium, the first woman to be ordained by a theological faculty of any rabbinical school, Rabbi Sally J. Priesand.
Thank you very much for that warm and gracious introduction. Let me take this opportunity to wish you a Mazel Tov on the 40th anniversary of your ordination. I remember it well because I was the speaker that day. Yeah. I'm really delighted to be here this evening for the opening of this unique exhibit as we celebrate 50 years of ordaining women in the Rabbinate. And it gives me great pleasure that this event is sponsored by the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives. As you heard, Dr. Marcus was a beloved teacher, the dean of American Jewish historians, and founder of the American Jewish Archives, which I consider to be the crown jewel of our Cincinnati campus. Despite the reimagining that is about to take place, I am grateful to have been assured by the administration that the archives will remain here in Cincinnati, allowed to grow and flourish. And when I retired, as you were told, I said that I would be donating my papers and documents and a lot of other things, I guess. And I'm so grateful that so many women rabbis of whatever denomination are following in my footsteps and doing that, so that when someone wants to do research on women in the rabbinate, they can come here and find everything that they need. And I really can't be standing here in this place without paying tribute to Dr. Marcus. When I came to Cincinnati in 1964, I was accepted as a special student. And immediately I was like, what does that mean? Are they already thinking about how they're going to get rid of me? But I was told, and you will see the letters downstairs. The interesting thing about the 5 letters that were sent to me when I applied, the interesting thing is that they tried to convince me to be a Jewish educator instead of a rabbi, and they came up with all of these different kinds of things. The interesting thing is that I never had the letters that I sent to them. People always ask me, well, what did you say in your letters? And I would not know. And amazingly, the archives had those letters in the HUC part of the collection of the archives. And so you will see those letters and a handwritten 16-year-old. And it really was a great surprise to me when I saw those letters and knew that they were found. So when I was accepted as a special student, I wanted to know, what does that mean? And they told me that it means that you're allowed to live in an apartment because we have no dormitories for women at the Hebrew Union College. So my good friend, Sherry Levy, it just happens that yesterday was her yard site, so she's very much in my mind. We shared an apartment on Howell near Clifton and Ludlow. It was a short walk up the hill to the College Institute, the same walk that Dr. Marcus took nearly every day. And I remember marveling at the way he navigated that hill. Even as he got older, his gait was strong, a sense of purpose in his step as he approached his beloved American Jewish Archives building. And when it came to American Jewish history, his mind was encyclopedic. He loved to share with us tidbits of history that we would probably never discover from anyone else, perhaps not even from our own research. We were mesmerized by the stories he told at a moment's notice, bringing alive the past and reflecting on the future. He delighted in inviting students to his home to engage in special projects, to share a Seder, or just to schmooze. Because of my unique role in history, he paid special attention to my progress. His support and encouragement were always welcome, and I began to feel like one of his boys, something I cherished because I knew that he used the term with great affection. And as my ordination approached, as you heard, he was among the first to share his reflections on the meaning of my ordination in a press release. And one of the things he said was, "It is sad to think that American Jewry has had to wait so long for a woman to be ordained a rabbi." Galileo was right. The earth does move, but sometimes it moves very, very slowly. Perhaps my favorite memory of Dr. Marcus was his presence at our Central Conference of American Rabbis conventions, especially at the alumni breakfast when the annual roll call was taken, starting with the newest rabbis and ending with the oldest one in attendance, which, by the way, this year I was almost the oldest one in attendance. But I remember that for so many years, we waited with eager anticipation to hear the last name we knew would be read, Dr. Jacob Rader Marcus, so we could give him the standing ovation he so richly deserved. And when he could no longer travel, he made certain to send a video message that could be played to us all. and he always remained a proud past president of the CCAR. It was at a CCAR convention here in Cincinnati near the end of his life, he lived almost to 100, that he was invited to preach at our convention service held at Plum Street Temple. And in my mind's eye, I can still see him on the bema, standing tall, his voice booming. And one of the things he addressed that day was the survival of the Jewish people, telling us in his own words to be more concerned about the quality of individual Jews and not their quantity. It is a message I have carried with me ever since. I think he would be pleased to know that I now serve as the vice chair of the B'nai Yaakov Council, and I am certain that he would be delighted by the way in which Dr. Gary Zola has followed in his footsteps, continuing to protect his legacy, grow the collection of historical documents housed at the AJA, and make them available to all who want to study the American Jewish experience. I want to thank you, Gary, for helping us to bring to light the story of Rabbi Regina Yonas. A few years ago, we had the privilege of visiting Berlin and walking in her footsteps with a group of rabbis, historians, and lay people. The trip was Dr. Zola's idea. He convinced the United States Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad, on which he served, to place a plaque at Terezin in memory of Regina Yonas. And he invited the Jewish Women's Archive and its founding director, Dr. Gail Reamer, to co-sponsor the trip. It was an amazing experience that words cannot really convey. But if you want to know more about it, you can find a brief award-winning video on the website of the Jewish Women's Archive, probably here at the AGAA too. And those of you who know me know that I am not a traveler. In fact, it took Dr. Zola 3 years to convince me to participate in this trip. Thank you, Gary, for not giving up on me. Standing here today, another person I want to remember is Dr. Nelson Glick, president of HUCJIR, the man most responsible for my ordination. He was passionate about those things that were important to him, and he had a certain charm that inspired others to dream bigger and do more. As someone once said, he brushed away the ruts that others were prone to stumble in. He stepped right over them, and he didn't even see them. He had a higher horizon. And that horizon enabled him to envision a day when women would serve the Jewish people as rabbis. And from the moment I arrived in Cincinnati, I knew that he believed in me. And I was conscious of the fact that ordaining a woman as rabbi was a decision being made by the College Institute itself under his leadership. The union and the CCAR had nothing to do with it. I was devastated when Dr. Glick died the year before I was ordained, but his wife, Helen, a distinguished physician and researcher here in Cincinnati, told me that before he died, he said there were 3 things that he wanted to live to do, and one of them was to ordain me. Throughout my career, I have had a picture of Dr. Glick hanging above my desk, together with a letter from his wife dated March 19th, 1971. The letter ends this way. I have already told you how meaningful your ordination would have been for him and how he would have loved to have seen that day. I am sure when I see you ordained, in my mind's eye, I will see his hands on your shoulders. For no matter whose hands are there, the meaning will be clear, the continuity of Jewish life and his immortality of spirit. This letter can be seen in the exhibit. I came to HUCJR because I wanted to be a congregational rabbi. That dream was fulfilled for me in 1981 when I became rabbi of Monmouth Reformed Temple in Tinton Falls, New Jersey, a position I was privileged to hold for 25 years, becoming Rabbi Emerita upon my retirement. Its members were warm and welcoming, open to new ideas, and unafraid of new challenges. They allowed me to be myself, to experiment with and be creative, and they were willing to take responsibility for their own Jewishness, one mitzvah at a time. Together, we created a temple family and studied Torah, hoping to discover what God would have us do and be. Our commitment to social justice grew from year to year. We provided a Jewish presence in our community, joining with others in the task of Tikkun Olam. And without my temple family, my life would never be the same. They kept me grounded, and they treated me not as the first, but simply as their rabbi. And I'm so grateful that some of my closest friends from Monmouth Reformed Temple have come to Cincinnati to share these next few days with me. Now, one of the questions that people most often ask me is, what is the most difficult thing about being a rabbi? For me, it has always been the need to change emotions at a moment's notice. For example, it is not unusual for a rabbi to celebrate a bar mitzvah and a baby naming, a funeral, a wedding, a round of hospital visits, all on the same weekend. Each moment requires its own emotional investment. And a rabbi must be able to move from sadness to joy and often back again. And all this despite whatever may be going on in the rabbi's personal life at a particular moment in time. Stress is a very real component of every rabbi's life, and every rabbi must find his or her own way of dealing with it. For me, I decided to start painting abstract watercolor. And it has become a wonderful way for me to calm my spirit. And you will see some of my work in the exhibit, as well as some of my photographs. Photography is another one of my hobbies. Now, I chose abstract watercolor for a variety of reasons. First of all, I draw like I sing. In other words, I can't even draw a stick figure. You know, in my temple, they would always say, just move your mouth. But at the microphone, you know, we can hear you. Second, to paint with watercolor does not require a lot of equipment. And you can express yourself quickly and with relative ease. Third, the vibrancy of the color never fails to lift one's spirits. And finally, watercolor allows for spontaneity and the sheer joy of allowing the paint to have a mind of its own and do what it will. In this, we find the paradox of my personality. In most things, I am controlled and super organized, but abstract watercolor gives expression to that other part of me, the playful side. Rarely does a painting turn out the way I imagined it, but that doesn't upset me in the least, because I have had so much fun matching wits with the paint as my brush glides across the surface of the paper, allowing me to bask in the brightness of the color and ultimately give thanks to God for implanting within each of us a spark of creativity. There is an enormous sense of fulfillment that emerges from any act of creation. And for me as an artist, I feel it most when the time comes to place my initials on the finished piece. And whenever I do that, I remember an insight I learned from a book called Shabbat Shalom, A Renewed Encounter with the Sabbath by the Israeli scholar Pinchas Peli. He suggested that Shabbat, standing as it does at the end of the story of creation, represents God's signature as the artist of the world. In other words, when God finished the work of creation and reviewed all that had been made and found it very good, then God wanted to place the divine name on this work of art, much like any artist does. And God wanted to do the same before handing the world over to humanity to cherish and take care of. The last two words of the first chapter of the book of Genesis are Yom HaShishi. And it was evening, and it was morning, the sixth day. And the first two words of the second chapter are Vayechulu HaShamayim, heaven and earth were finished. When we join these two chapters together, as we do in the traditional Shabbat Kiddush, and we combine the first letters of these words, Yom HaShishi Vayechulu HaShamayim, Yud He Vav He, they spell the four-letter name of God, which we pronounce as Adonai, and which represents, as it were, the signature of the creator of the world, the artist who gave us the beauty of creation and the ability to be creators too. Whenever we imitate God, we enrich lives for ourselves and for others. Now, some of the other things that you will see in the exhibit, I told you about the original letters and all of that. There's some interesting pictures of my baby picture, for example. There are newspaper clippings. There are just a few in the exhibit. Believe me, the archives now has many, many, many more. And one of my favorites, I just always remember this one. I was on a speaking tour, and I think I spoke around 4 different places in California, and this writer, columnist wrote, Rabbi Sally came to Hollywood, and Hollywood fell at her feet. That's always one of my favorites. There are letters from all over the world that I received when I was ordained. There are a few included in the exhibit. One of the ones I remember most, I remember not the letter, but the envelope. The envelope said it was from the barber shop in someplace in South Carolina. And so I really had a lot of support from all over the world. There are lots of photographs of me and my classmates. check out the 1970s outfit I was wearing, one of my favorite outfits. My Super Sisters card. You may not know, but in 1979, two women, they were teachers in New York, got a grant to make a group of trading cards for girls that featured women. And it was because one of their daughters saw the baseball cards and said, why are there no cards for girls? So I have a Super Sisters card. I'm very proud of it. And I'm happy to tell you that Super Sisters has contacted us this year. They're going to put out a second set of Super Sister cards. So if you have anybody you want to nominate, send in their name, look them up online. The book Sandy Sasso has just written about me, Sally Opened Doors for Children, is downstairs. We were able to get an advance copy. The books itself, you can order them on Amazon. They should be out in about 2 weeks. But I like to think of this book as the third in a series of books she has written. Her first book in this series was called Regina Persisted. It's about Regina Yonas. The second book in the series was called Judy Led the Way, about Judith Kaplan, who was the first bat mitzvah. And that happened 100 years ago. It was in 1922. And that book, I'm happy to say, was chosen by the PJ Library. If you're familiar with that group, you sign your child up from birth until 6 years old. They will get from the PJ Library a Jewish book every month. And sometimes instead of a book for the child, it will be a book for the parents about being good Jewish parents. So I'm really very, very excited about that. And the last thing I want to tell you that I still don't really believe, but my portrait is going to hang in the National Portrait Gallery of the Smithsonian. And this really happened because of my good friends, Rabbi Amy and Gary Perlin. They have been working with the museum, the gallery, for about 3 years. What they would like to do is make certain that there is a Jewish section that shows that Jews have been involved in American history since the beginning. That hasn't totally been approved yet. They're still working on that. And so, believe it or not, right now it's just me and Isaac Mayer Wise. Isaac Mayer Wise, I believe his painting was just put up. And mine, as Amy always reminds me, I had to go through the same process to be accepted as Abraham Lincoln went through. I have decided instead of a painting that I would like a photograph. And if you were at the Holy Sparks exhibit, the person who took that photo, Joan Roth, who will be here in Cincinnati tomorrow, she has been approved by the gallery, the Smithsonian, to be the person to take that picture. And Wise Temple has made it possible for us to spend a few hours at Plum Street on Monday taking some photos, because that might be the one that we choose. We don't know yet. We take a lot. That photo in Holy Sparks took 5 hours before we chose that one. So thank you so much for being here this evening. If you like what you see, please invite your family and friends to come and see this exhibit. It will be here for the next several months. And I want to extend a special thank you to Lisa Frankel and Dana Herman and their professional designer and all the people who helped for working so lovingly to put together this amazing exhibit. And of course, don't forget the Holy Sparks exhibit at the Skirball. Thank you so much.
Now, friends, like a wonderful institution, any wonderful Jewish institution, we have a beautiful repast for you as you step out, and so you can enjoy some goodies, and please do stay and watch the, take a look at the exhibit. I do want to just elaborate on one thing that Sally just said, and that is, Lisa, come down here, will you please? Listen, I come down here. So some of you know in the room that Lisa Frankel and I have worked together. This summer we'll mark our 38th anniversary. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay.
Hard to keep track.
Yeah, it's so long that it's a miracle we can remember each other's names. And of course, she was just a little lost waif on the street of Cincinnati at that time, which is why she's so youthful. But you know, I always like to say that one day when someone is talking about my career at the Hebrew Union College, they will say that the finest thing that I did was find Lisa Frankel and retain her for 38 years. So what Rabbi Priesand just said is no exaggeration. Lisa and the staff, who I'm going to ask to stand in a minute and be recognized, it's one thing for a director, some of you know this by yourselves, one thing for a director to say we're going to do X or we're going to do Y or Z, but it takes a loving, supportive staff to make that all happen. And without that, none of this could happen. So will all those who are serving at the American Jewish Archives please stand if you're in the room, please. And let's give everybody a big hand.
Oh, where's Dana?
So friends, with that, and for those of you who are watching on live stream, this will bring a conclusion to our program. Again, we're so happy to see you. Please make yourself at home with the snacks and the treats that we are offering outside, and then please enjoy the exhibit. It will be open for a year, and again, as I said, we will be creating an electronic way that you'll be able to visit this exhibit even if you're not in Cincinnati. Okay? Thanks a lot, friends.